is our first live podcast. Thank you for being brave enough to join us on a Friday before a holiday week at that, and in your home office.
Thank you for having me. Yes, it's so with normal podcasts, it's like I'll be halfway through saying something and I'll be like, that was so dumb. Let me say that again. And with live, you don't get to do that. So apologies in advance.
We're not worried about you. We're not worried about you at all. And right, we love that everybody's okay. Everybody's saying hello. Good. Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Gio, good morning. Where are you today?
I am in Denver. It is, I'm a Texas boy in snowy Denver today. It was a fun drive in. New York got some good snow too.
Although not does Manhattan get snow? Buffalo got snow, which is further north. Jamie, do you have snow?
No, I'm in Brooklyn.
He's looking out. He's like,
I did look outside.
Did
I was like, oh. I took my daughter for a little walk this morning and we were very cold, but there was no snow.
How old is she now?
9 months.
Already. I was thinking about that this morning. I feel like he just had a baby. I mean, kind of, but almost.
I still feel the same way. I mean, every parent says this, like, holy crap, it moves so fast. You got to be ready for that. And now as a parent, I can say, holy crap, it moves so fast. That was very accurate.
You're in the club. Totally. Yeah, my daughter just turned 11 and yes, it goes very fast. Hector's on. Oh, Laurent's on. Sorry, guys, I can't figure out how to get my video on. So you get to, I mean, I did my hair, I did all the things. So, but now you're enjoying Gio and Jamie. Maybe I can get the video on at some point. Okay, let's kick off. So Jamie, I think everybody knows who you are, but Jamie Hodari, CEO of Industrious, and co-founder. It's lovely to talk to you. I'll let Gio jump in, but Jamie, I think you did my original podcast like at the beginning of COVID. And I remember that we had it scheduled and I was like, of course he's going to want to cancel this. And I think I tried to cancel it and your people were like, no, it's totally fine. He's fine. Everything's fine. And you were in the middle of like getting furniture to people. And I think it was right at the beginning and maybe we rescheduled for a little bit later because I thought this guy needs a little space to figure out what's happening. So
I will say I have a lot of siblings. I don't totally know why, but I think I oftentimes process things through talking and conversation. So in a moment of chaos and a lot of flux like that, I can't recall exactly should we do the podcast not? But I bet part of it was like, I'm sure Jamie's going to ask great questions and it will help me to process what's going on and think about how to manage through a moment like this versus saying, let me go sit in a room with a notebook.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah, and it's been an adjustment for Jamie to start doing this uncensored podcast with me because of our first guest. She's like, well, we need to send questions ahead of time. And what are we going to ask? And I'm like, that's the uncensored part. We get to have a really candid conversation and we'll just see where it goes. So we're excited that you were willing to jump on and certainly have this live conversation. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now from multiple angles. And so, it's great to hear from not just thought leaders, but industry leaders like yourself as to, kind of how you're shifting and adjusting coming out of the pandemic and then going into the recession and just shifts and changes that we're going through. So really appreciate that and look forward to having this conversation.
So I'm going to jump in with my first question, which I'm really curious about is, things have really shifted post COVID. I mean, they were on their own trajectory as it was. And, what the end consumer is looking for has shifted. And Jamie, you guys are experimenting. I think when we I can't remember if this was when we talked or if I just was following along on this, but you were experimenting with converting a hotel, I think in Williamsburg.
Yes.
Is that still an experiment?
We did that with the White Hotel. And look, let me start by saying even before COVID, I think we've always, not uniquely among our competitors, but I would say have really had a point of view about pushing the envelope about what can be a workplace, where can you work? And that was true, most notably probably in the fact that there are a lot of Industriouses in malls that are among our top performing units. And then during COVID, it became even clearer that if people could work from anywhere, anywhere could be a workplace. And so we did that with hotels. We've done that with Avalon Bay, one of the largest residential owners in the country. We just created workplaces in a few of their, and are going to do more of their large residential buildings. And I really am a true believer in that. Some people want to go to the 40th floor of a gorgeous glass and steel office tower, and other people have a very different image in their mind of what would make for a productive, engaging, happy place to work. And you want to find a way to deliver that, you know, where people want to be.
So I got a chance, you were talking about malls, I got a chance to finally visit Short Hills maybe about a month ago, and it is absolutely amazing what y'all did with that space. Jamie's on, hello. So I mean, so was that your first mall that you did?
Our first mall was Fashion Square, a mall
that's
in
right.
Scottsdale. That one is like really one of the most successful Industrious in the world. And that was a little bit cheating, not cheating, but it was a little helpful because it is a mall. I mean, it's got an Apple store and a, you know, whatever, like an Ann Taylor, and but it's kind of on the main drag in Scottsdale. So it's not really a suburban mall that you have to, you know, sort of drive out to,
Destination mall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we've done a lot in things that are closer to destination malls, and maybe Short Hills would count as that. And you know, it's not cheap. I think you have to add in a lot of glass and windows, because oftentimes we're converting a Barney's or a you know, a Macy's or something like that. And in those situations, you don't, the setup is very inward looking. And with workplaces, you need a lot of natural light. So other than that, though, it's relatively straightforward. I think actually, not to get too in the weeds, but in the Short Hills one, there was a limitation on the number of exterior windows we could do. So that one, we worked with the landlord to put in all sorts of skylights, access to, and I love skylights. Like I'm, maybe we could do a little tour of my house, but anyway, I'm a big skylight person. So for me, I think that's a cool part of that Short Hills location.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, when I toured it, I was amazed how much natural light it was. I mean, first 10 years of my career was on the retail side, so I've seen a lot of conversions of big boxes, and it's just the way y'all were able to bring the light in was pretty amazing. So great job on that to you.
Skylights are nice because obviously with a window, it's directional light and it kind of diffuses at a certain point in terms of how deep into the floor plate it can reach, whereas with a skylight, the light is from above. So I think you get more coverage from the same sort of, you know, amount of glass, or however you want to think of it.
Yeah, no. And so go ahead, Jamie.
I'm just curious. So Jamie, your model is 100% managed relationships with the landlords at this point. So when you go into a mall and you need to do that work, that's an upfront discussion with the landlord. Like, here's what we need. This is what we need to make it work. We can't just move into this, you know, big, dark, cavernous space and, you know, flip it over. We need to invest.
Yeah. Yes. I am all about upfront discussions. I feel like that in life saves a lot of heartache. And I do think that has been helpful with this. So for the audience, we do partnership agreements with landlords. So instead of us signing a lease, we owe X amount of money, we run the unit. And if that unit's not doing well, God forbid, all of a sudden you're in this giant problem and you end up potentially need to close or things like that. We have some older original units that are structured that way. But after our first 40 locations, we switched to partnership agreements. And I think one of the things I really like about it is you do get to sit down and just say, what is the plan for this building and how much is going to cost? And what are both of our hopes and aspirations for it? And what are the concerns? And there really isn't much incentive in that structure to hide anything or to wait to drop the ball. You know, you have every incentive to get it all out in the open day one, in part because it's a, you know, you both, you know, we're a growing company. We have to focus, we have to be thoughtful about our time. So if a landlord, you want to say, hey, you're going to have to spend an additional $2 million because you're going to need to reinforce the ceiling, or you're going to XYZ. And you want to know early on if it's like, oh man, that's going to not work for us so that you don't spend lots and lots of
The
time
fast
and waste
no
our
from the
time.
landlord is always better, right? Because
Yes,
those, yeah.
yes.
And I think what you guys have done a really good job as a team overall, and certainly you on an executive level, is building relationships with landlords that give you portfolios to go after, right? Not just individual one-off landlords. I mean, it's a lot easier to grow by building relationships and growing through a portfolio.
Yes. Although that's been, so there's one challenge to that. So yes, like I love our relationship with Blackstone, Vornado, Brookfield, like I think those institutional landlords, I know that they famously are sharp-elbowed and stuff, but I think for the most part, we've not found that to be the case. I think a lot of the large institutional landlords are very professional. They're less likely to be capricious or kind of, you know, go off the handle in a meeting or something like that. I think they're good at saying, here's what my aims are. And you can trust that 9 months from now, that will still be the same set of aims, and 2 years from now. So in general, I like that a lot of our growth has been through those institutional partnerships, multi-market. The one downside is the places I would love to grow in right now, you know, we'll probably launch 50 units next year. I would like, and I think we will, have 35 of those 50 be in neighborhoods. Cobble Hill in Brooklyn, you know, Lincoln Park in Chicago. And oftentimes those mid-sized buildings in those types of neighborhoods are not owned
Smaller
by
landlords. Yeah.
KKR or stuff like that. And so we're having to figure out, how do we reproduce a lot of the same success we've had with the 3 cousins that own a building
Right.
in Williamsburg or something like that.
So that being said, I think a good question there is, if you're shifting some of your product type towards a neighborhood driven location, is that affecting the size that you would do in those neighborhoods, or are you still looking at that same size range as you are for regular Industrious?
I think everything's a little different based on where it is. And I don't mean that in a mushy way. I just mean that we have seen competitors run into a little bit of trouble where they were like, this is our standard layout, and we just rinse and repeat. Because it's not just that it would be different in a neighborhood because it's smaller. It's that in a neighborhood, you're not going to have 50-person teams.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't build out a 50-person office. And actually, people do less big external meetings. Like we have a Prospect Heights, Brooklyn location. The most oversubscribed Industrious in the history of it. I think it has like a 50 company waiting list. But there's not a lot of 20-person, you know, pitch meetings happening there. Because usually if they're pitching an external client, they're not going to ask them to come to Prospect Heights. They're going to go to Midtown or something like that. And so you actually, I think, have to make all sorts of tweaks to the way you build out a workplace to honor the neighborhood and the space that it's in. And one of them is, yes, in a neighborhood, I think we would do a 50,000 square foot Industrious in Noda in Charlotte, for example, or in Beverly Hills or something like that. But there aren't giant chunks of space available. So actually the main reason you have to go small when you're in neighborhoods is that if you want to be above the crepe shop on the main drag in Greenwich, Connecticut, you got to find a way to make it work in 8,000 square feet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I thought you brought up a great point, and I still remember you reaching out to Charlie and myself, and then setting up a call with Mark Rose after the CBRE investment. And you know, you've done an incredible, and I remember the conversation. You've done an incredible job with maintaining those partnerships with outside real estate advisors. And that strategy was, because I know from the very beginning, and I know the ongoing conversation has been, well, CBRE now controls the relationship and the decisions. But again, I think you've done an incredible job continuing to work with people outside of CBRE. So kudos to you for that. I mean, that's a difficult dynamic. How's that?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think we've worked really hard at that. And, you know, I'm about to say how amazing CBRE is. So that's going to make it sound like I'm in the tank for them. But I think Avison Young, and you know, there's a lot of great organizations in the real estate services space. What I will say is sometimes good fences make good neighbors. And I think when we did the deal with CBRE, we were very clear, like this would be horrible for everyone if it appeared that you controlled the company or if you had a pathway to taking over the company. And so when we did the deal, much more so than in normal strategic investment cases, and particularly because it was 2020, so you'd think Industrious didn't have a lot of leverage. We really did say the only way to do this is if there's some boundaries and you know, you're a minority investor and there's caps so that you could never become a majority investor, and we need to be able to give the market that confidence. And they got it. They were, it wasn't like they were pushing us hard in the other direction. They kind of understood we want exposure to this business. We want exposure to this sector. Like, they're true believers in Flex. We want to partner with you and be able to commercially help offer what you do to many CBRE clients. And we want to do it in a way that makes it clear you're an independent business and doesn't impact your ability to do business with JLL or Cushman or others as well. And I think for the most part, that's worked out well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Kudos to you. So quick question along those lines is, obviously HANA, you know, was a CBRE product that came out. I mean, you don't have to confirm or deny, but they really struggle with that. So I'm sure that was part of the investment. So what's the long-term strategy for HANA? Is that kind of your luxury brand, if you will? Is it just going to eventually become Industrious? What's the plan with evolving new brands within Industrious?
It's, I mean, it's something we've wrestled with. So we really like HANA. Like, I don't, they might have struggled with it at a corporate level of just as a giant company, how do you run a, you know, but I actually, the product is amazing. It's probably nicer than the average Industrious. Like, they spent more per square foot. It's just, you see it when you go there. And it's maybe a little less residential feeling. Industrious probably brings a little more of that in. HANA's very clearly like in the vein and the DNA of the high-end classical sort of corporate workplace settings, but not classical in a boring way, like a Google or something like that. So I think we have struggled to figure out, how do you market 5 brands simultaneously? You know, we bought a company called TechSpace. We bought a company, Welcome to Meraki. We bought The Great Room. And we've just, I think we've always gone back and forth on, like, it is kind of a pain in the ass to run, you know, 6 brands and run ads against 6 brands and stuff. And so what we've said is, like, let's keep these brands around for the day when we get sophisticated enough to actually be able to run a multi-brand strategy. So, like, if you walk into the former HANA units, they actually still say HANA by Industrious. We didn't alter them. They still have that. And so now we've got this kind of stable of brands that for the most part are run today as, you know, all under the Industrious name. But we're trying to do what we can to keep the spirit of them alive, the aesthetics alive, some of the back-end digital stuff alive, because I'm hoping, like, by a year from now, we'll be ready to actually have the type of businesses that can run 3 or 4 brands. And we can get into it if you want, but suffice to say, I think that would be a good competitive position in this industry. There are people that want a luxury product. There are people that want a super corporate product. There are people that want something that feels like their living room. And it is hard to do that all under one name and one brand.
Well, not just that, the pricing, right? And you just mentioned it, right? And there's no secret. Walking into HANA, you look around, you're like, this is beautiful. But how, and under a partnership, same thing as Convene. I still remember pre-pandemic walking into Convene, and we're all like, this is amazing, but how's the landlord ever to make their money back, right? And so, I mean, even under the Industrious traditional brand, I mean, you guys are what, in the 160 to 180 range, kind of on average in build out?
The range is probably wider than that at this point, because we're in 10 countries. So you've got Hong Kong and London. You've also got Charleston, South Carolina. But yeah, we're the partnership agreement model. It does put some pressure on that. You know, you want to be a good partner to the landlord. You have to be amazing stewards of their capital. And what I see with a lot of even the deepest pocketed landlords, when it crosses 180, anything that starts with a 2, you know, there are landlords. We have Industrious as the cost $250 a square foot to build out, but that's because that landlord said, that's what I want, and I'm willing to spend it. You know, are you guys willing to build it out? And we were like, hell yeah, we would love to build out a $300 square foot space. But that's probably a certain set of landlords that have really iconic assets that are looking to invest in that way. I think typically something more in the $150 square foot range, you can deliver a really wonderful product that would work for the JP Morgans of the world and the small startups. And that works for most landlords cost-wise as well.
And that doesn't include FF&E, right? That's just true build out, or does that include FF&E?
The number I was just giving, I was thinking of it including FF&E. That is probably like, we have maybe we're getting a little too under the hood here. It depends a lot on the market and stuff like that. We do have Industriouses that were probably 130 all in, including FF&E and electrical and everything, and that would be at the real low end and a low price market. You know, we used to have a St. Louis location, etc. And then probably the average is, you know, north of that, and then it can get quite
for sure.
So I can't believe that Gio didn't use this opportunity. We have a drinking game that we play called Bonvoy.
It's
You made me nervous about it.
Some people are in California right now.
Yes, I only have my tea. It's 9:24. But just to circle back quickly to your brand strategy, we talk a lot about Coworks, which is the parent brand to VentureX and Office Evolution,
right.
like thinking about this Bonvoy. And you talked about how like kind of complex it is to market several brands, right? It's easy to go to market kind of straightforward with one. What do you think about sort of the hotel flag, multi-brand strategy? Like, is that in the future and it's just like, let's take some time to get there, or?
Yes.
So
I think that is the right setup for our industry, even more so than with hotels, because hotels are very B2C.
Yeah.
But because this business has a B2C component and a giant B2B component, where increasingly part of the reason we did these 2 international acquisitions is every day I see more companies say, like, if you're British Airways or on a Heineken or something, like, I want to pick a partner and figure out my IT needs with them and figure out my, my physical security needs and everything like that. And then I want to work with them in 8 countries. Like, I don't really want to start all over again in Tampa and then again in Berlin and then again in San Francisco. And, right now we work in IWG are really the only global providers. Other than now, we're really at a scale where we can basically play in that as well. But as a result of that, I think even more so than with hotels, you have corporate buyers that want to work with someone at the corporate level that they have a specific name for and a counterparty for. And then, they would be okay with different brands. I mean, think about Johnson & Johnson, or one of these companies that has 100,000 employees. Like, they might want to put their New York finance team or, marketing and sales team in a product that's $1,100 a desk. And they might not be able to do that with their back-end data entry team in, Henderson, Texas or something like that. And so the only way you could accomplish that would be to have multiple brands at multiple price points.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the business to business side. I mean, I think enterprise has obviously been a huge driver of growth over the last few years, certainly pre-pandemic and even coming out of it. I mean, so to what level is your enterprise commitment and involvement versus the entrepreneur, the small, medium-sized business? Because I know it was a big push for a bit.
I think Industrious has a reputation as being very enterprise heavy. It's partially true. Like, if I look at our data, it's, it's not, we have a big enterprise business. But I think we are probably enterprise focused largely from a quality standard point of view. I remember reading, there's this book Made to Stick that's about marketing and storytelling and how do you and there's a little part in the book where he talks about some cybersecurity company. And he's it's 2 brothers wrote it, but whatever. They're this cybersecurity company, their whole thing was they had to sell into the Department of Defense. Because the moment they could say well, if we're good enough for the Department of Defense, we're probably good enough for your veterinary clinic or wherever. And I think there's a little bit of that, of making sure that you could deliver and can prove you can deliver to Goldman Sachs or Verizon or whoever, both because it is important from a business point of view and because it's a good test of your capabilities and of your sophistication. And then I think the reason I hesitate to say we're as deep into enterprise as people sometimes think is that we will serve every enterprise that is excited about us and wants to work with us anywhere they want up to a certain number of seats. And then beyond a certain number of seats, I just believe deep down, it's not a good economic proposition for the occupier. It's not a good outcome. It's usually swing space. So we don't play in the 350 seat mega space that WeWork does, for example. And I don't know if we ever will. I mean, maybe one day if we can figure out that economic model, but either the occupier is paying some crazy amount and is going to resent you forever until the day they can get out of it, or you're going to have to sell it at a loss and you're going to resent them. And it's just, I think maybe after 80 to 100 seats, I really see that the flex in the traditional way breaks down. I don't want to ramble. I can say how Industrious actually solves those larger team needs if helpful, or we can move on.
Yeah, I think to your point, we're working on some stuff in Vegas, and WeWork has 100,000 square foot location there that DraftKings was in half of, that just vacated or is in the process of. So
my heart is racing hearing about
I know. I mean, how do you
I
backfill
know.
that, right? How long does it take you to backfill it? And so, I mean, you make a really, really good point. And it's like that HQ model that so many people have tried. It's like, it's really difficult to keep that going, right? It's awesome when you fill it up and you're cashing that big check, but good luck backfilling that space.
Here's my thesis then for what those larger spaces will eventually look like. Like, part of the problem is that our industry has been set up as disruptive. It's us versus traditional leasing. It's the WeWork versus the landlords. And I think that has like inhibited a certain way or constrained people's the sort of a wider aperture of like, what could this be? And the more you're like, okay, well, we're in the mix with the landlord and we work with CBRE or Cushman, and this is all an ecosystem, the easier it is to say at 500 people, you should do a deal directly with Blackstone for a portion of the building and with us for a portion, and people can move back and forth, between the spaces. And we have a really exciting version of that we just did with JP Morgan in Palo Alto that's now sort of out in the press, and we are doing more and more of that. And that's when it's done right. It's complicated, but that's actually the best price option for the occupier. It's just the best for everyone involved. And someone on this call needs to invent the word for it, because we call it fixed flex leasing or core flex leasing, and there's no good word for it.
I mean, it's really just a hybrid between, permanent space and flexible space, right?
Yeah.
Even that fluidity.
Yeah.
One's a sexier word, I think.
Hybrid, the problem is everyone has another thing they're referring
Definition
to
of that,
hybrid for
exactly.
in the workplace realm.
Okay, while you're thinking about that, I want to flip from the 100,000 square foot question to like the Avalon Bay relationship with smaller footprints in the sort of live work model, the accordion lease. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, so Avalon Bay, I think some of us are like, those spaces must be small, and does that make sense? Is it sort of worth?
Yeah.
And are they like, what does the model look like with those?
I will start by saying to that question of like, you didn't say the whole part out loud, but I think like, is it really worth the effort? Like, yeah, they are small. I think this is going to sound a little in the clouds, but like the way people work is changing, and everyone's just trying to figure out like, what's it going to look like 5 years from now and what works for me. And they have days where they get so much done and they're like, I felt on top of the world today. I got 5 days, and they have days where it's like, I just was at my computer the whole damn day and nothing happened. I can't figure out why. I feel like I worked, but when I look at the end of the day, I didn't accomplish anything. And getting to the bottom of like what makes for that first type of day where it's like, it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of data and there's a lot of experimentation, and people are doing their own process of self-exploration. And so for the time being, I don't want us to lose money, but I'm not that worried about like, is it worth the effort, or is the space too small? Like, I want to get to the bottom of where should people be working in the best possible ways, where in the country, where in their own city, what types of spaces. And so to me, yes, they're a little bit small. Yes, they're going to be a good amount of work. And I think it's totally worth it for everything we're going to learn and Avalon Bay is going to learn, and it will help the business in the long run. And anytime you can do R&D and help a partner in the process and not have to lose money or spend money doing it, I think that's a pretty good, outcome for a business. And then as far as what they'll actually look like, they're much bigger than normal lounges at a residential building. So this is not just like putting a brand name on the like second floor lounge of a building with some couches. And it is a workplace. It has meeting rooms, it has offices. It's relatively small. And then that both serves the tenants of the building and also is going to be and is being marketed to the outside world in these neighborhood locations. So I have a feeling they're going to be really successful. And then Avalon Bay is going to say, is going to have to decide for their next building, do you size up a bit, or do you just say, it's going to have to be 4,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet? And yeah, it'll be a hot commodity and it'll be booked most of the time.
Yep.
And that's okay.
That's fine. Are they staffed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that staffing question is a good one. I mean, the biggest part about our industry is hospitality, right? And so a lot of times when people ask me who the best operators are, I often tend to go towards the local and regionals because it's easier to maintain that hospitality. How do you do a great job maintaining the hospitality side, but also the culture that you've built at Industrious with having so many locations in so many parts of the world?
It's like, first off, I really appreciate the question. I think this is so biased. When I was a small provider, I was like, the small providers have the best hospitality. And now that we're big, it's like, but I do genuinely, I think the hospitality in the average Industrious today is better than it was when we were like a 15 unit provider. And that's not always true in every industry, but I do think like, Disney, Delta Airlines, I think a lot of hotels, Four Seasons have cracked the code of how to scale this kind of stuff. I think, one reality in Flex is it's not ultra highly staffed. It's not like a hotel with 37 full-time, on the ground staff members. It's often one person, it's often 2, 3 people. And part of the problem when you're a small provider, I have found is, you have to do everything. So you are trying desperately to like take care of the person who's like, you're out of bagels or the toaster's not working. And also you're trying to do, Salesforce data entry in the back, and you're negotiating with the electric company because they overcharge you. And it just becomes a bit overwhelming. And I think what oftentimes happens is people feel a lot of affection for the community manager in these smaller providers because they're good people, they care. But the actual like true, high-end customer experience sometimes suffers because of how much is on their plate. And when you're bigger, you can take more of that off their plate and free people up to be, a 100% customer focused. Or like, if they're like, hey, I have an idea, I want to do a special World Cup happy hour where I have the flags of the top 10 countries that are most likely to win the World Cup, and I make 2 cocktails we're like, great, we actually have a playbook for that from 2018. Let me send you that. And that person gets to spend most of their time out with the customers delivering that, rather than spending 6 hours researching, World Cup, betting rankings and like, Brazilian cocktail recipes and things like that. That's kind of how I see it play out.
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you, I mean, so going back to Short Hills, we just kind of dropped in as I often do. And I'm always real honest about who I am before I asked for a tour. And the young lady that was there was amazing, right? She was getting ready to leave to open another location that y'all were doing. And so to that point, I love the quote that says, people don't always remember what you say, but how you make them feel. And that's been my experience in a lot of your locations, especially recently, right? And so that's why I asked the question is why, how do you do such a good job doing that? And really you find core teams like the person I just mentioned, and you smiled, you probably know exactly who it is. It's just so amazing how once you find those people that are bought into the brand, bought into the vision, they'll do anything for you.
I am a weird thing for New Jersey though. Like I'm from Michigan. I've never lived in New Jersey, but you know, it's the most educated state in the union. It's like I feel like all these New Jersey community managers are going to keep getting promoted to other roles. But yes, I really appreciate you saying that. I think we think a lot about it. And I know there was a question about digital. Can I say a couple things about the
Yeah.
interaction between
Yeah,
what we're
jump
talking
in.
like?
Yeah.
That is a question for the business right now, because I think people, you think, you know, to your point about you remember how people made you feel. People, hospitality is a very human, very humane thing. And also, like the Target right near me in Brooklyn, the self-checkout line is always like longer at this point than the normal checkout line. Like there are a lot of people who have a revealed preference for, I want it easy. I want it like, I don't want to have to talk to a person if I don't have to. And so that's one of the big things we're trying to work through right now is what experiences should be digital in a workplace or digitally mediated at your election, and also can be in person when you want it to be, and how do you sort of have people seamlessly move back and forth between the two. But I think we're just trying to figure out how to deliver all of the digital expectations people have and not have that over time erode the human elements of running a great productive workplace.
So here's the question. We're going away from, we're going to get on a personal level real quick, not super personal. So obviously you're a very passionate person. So the answer can't be a professional response, but what makes you tick and what makes you excited on a personal side? I mean, when you step away from this camera and you get to do what you love, what does that look like? What is it?
Well, I think any new parent would probably say first, second, and third. It's just this like really wonderful, really fulfilling experience. And I will say, a lot of people warned me and my wife before we had our kid, like, it's all joy and no happiness, like, get ready. And we have not really found that to be the case. Like, yeah, there's days that are a drag. I think we found it to be really fun. And like, you know, this morning, you know, she was like, are you so excited? We're going to spend the whole weekend with Vivi. So like, I don't want to be that guy, but I do think right now in my life, that's definitely the non-work thing that I get the most excited about. I really love reading. There was maybe a period when I was in law school, when I was a lawyer, where I was like only reading nonfiction. And then I kind of was like, if I don't pull the brakes on this, I'm going to be 70 and, you know, just talk about like, you know, whatever, George Washington or like XYZ. So I went back into mostly reading fiction. And now I probably read a book every week, every other week, 80% fiction. And it's just like such a source of, I think, relaxation and joy and keeping your mind nimble for me. And then I did discover video games during the pandemic, and I'm 41, so I'm like a little embarrassed about
That's
it.
a good reveal, Jamie.
Going back to the
Super into
dorky
them.
comment.
I don't know. And to connect the two, I have a book recommendation for everyone. Evan just asked this. It's a book that came out a couple months ago. It's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And it's a fiction book about two friends that start a video game company. And it's an unbelievable book. We did it for the Industrious book club last month, and everyone was crying in the book club session. Oh. And it's cool because a lot of people probably on this call are entrepreneurs in some way. And it is primarily a story of a friendship, and probably secondarily a story about video games, but it is also a story about building a company over decades and what it does to a friendship. And so it also resonated for me personally because I founded Industrious with my best friend.
Yeah, and so that's actually, it's funny that you said that, because that's exactly where I was headed next is, I mean, obviously, I mean, it says a lot that you founded it with your best friend, right? And, you know, I think it's, I was able to build a friendship with Justin before really, you know, connecting with you. And so I think it's so amazing that y'all have different personalities, but at the same time, you know, y'all have different sides of how you handle a business, right? I mean, you're really the face of the company in a lot of ways. And he's kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say he's gotten comfortable with it. Seems like he's gotten comfortable with kind of being the back end of stuff. How does that dynamic continue to evolve?
So he runs our real estate team.
Yeah.
And I think like, so he's out there. I would say he's not like in an internal facing role, but he's very much landlord, 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 landlord. And that's the world he came from. And I think like when I think about Industrious's biggest competitive advantage, it's probably our customer experience, number one. But I would say tied with that or right behind it is our business model, is the fact that we are the one company that has actually managed to move to 90% management agreements. And we're doing them in places like Germany now, where everyone said it wasn't possible. And that's all thanks to him. So I think, you know, he's got a lot of pride in the fact that he basically ran the team that has cracked the biggest, I think the most difficult code in our industry. And I don't know why it's worked so well, because I know I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and usually when friends start a business, it can get ugly and I don't know. We talk about it all the time. Like we think we really care about each other a lot. Like it's a little bit more like starting it with a brother, because he's an only child and I had a lot of siblings and we grew up truly next door. Sometimes people say next door neighbor, they mean 3 blocks over. Like our houses looked directly into each other. And so he was at my house every day growing up. We don't, you know, so I think maybe it's different than when you say friends started a business and it's like two people went to HBS together, were in the same section, went drinking a few times in Cambridge, and then like got some VC money. I mean, this is since we were 2 years old, you know, I'd rather lose Industrious than lose that friendship. And I think Justin probably feels the same way. So there's probably an intimacy and just like, I guess, love, for lack of a better word, that isn't actually normally there when you talk about friends starting a company.
Do you think some of that is based off your faith base and similar belief systems and just overall how y'all were raised?
We're both Jewish, but like pretty reform, you know, go during maybe Rosh Hashanah or something like that. So, but I think it's a good question. I don't it is nice having shared memories from, like, I remember reading something about marriages once that said like the first couple of years of your marriage are super important, because you know, when you talk to couples who've been together 30 years or something, they oftentimes talk about those romantic early years or something as a source of strength for them. And like we just have tons of, you know, childhood sort of shared memories and shared experiences and stuff. So it's not quite the same as like like a deep faith system, but I think we probably have a similar ethical system, a similar belief. Like we're both pretty like egalitarian at heart is one thing. Like I don't think this is the company where you'd get the like CEO pay being 25x the average pay or something like that. So yeah, and I'm rambling a little. I would say I think we're wired in a similar way. We have different personalities, and the fact that we had a common childhood and probably same community we grew up in, etc., means there are probably lots of invisible like intertwinements and ties between us that make it easier.
Yeah, and I think a big part, and I think Jamie would agree with this, and probably most people that have interacted with you, is you really are a genuine good guy, right? And that's not often what is at the top of a lot of these companies, right? And I think y'all both have that in common. So again, kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, you have to be tough as a CEO. Like I do think I think I'm a nice guy. I think I'm friendly, but like you have to fire people, you have to hold people accountable, you have to, you know, like, I don't know, you there's just all sorts of stuff like that. And so, you know, part of my own personal journey has just been having to be like, does that square with like, it's Jamie, like friendly, whatever, Jay, like, and I think I've figured out how to do it in a way that's authentic and real. And, you know, but there might be some employees at Industrious who would say like, hey, you know, like that guy is smiley and fun until you fuck up, and then he's not that smiley and fun or whatever. And, you know, that's a thing to navigate in running a business.
And I think a better way to say it than nice guy is you have a good heart, right? I mean, nice guy can be misconstrued in all kinds of ways, but yeah, you have to do what you have to do. And that's the hardest part, is no one wants to fire anyone. No one wants to, you know, bear down and be difficult, but that's part of the role that you have to play.
Yeah, I think you put so much time and love and energy into building a business. And if it's not a thing you're proud of, meaning the business comports itself in a way that you're not proud of, if it, like that, then why do it? Like it would just be so draining. You'd probably feel like a fraud when you went to bed at night. And so I do think having a business where you believe in the sort of integrity of the way it behaves and in a set of values that sort of guide the way the business behaves, I do think it's an important part of like being able to do this for 20 years and not waking up in a cold sweat or, whatever, having a breakdown.
Yeah, I would say, Jamie, that was the word that was going through my mind when you were talking about sort of nice guy was integrity and also authenticity, which I get from, your brand and your personal brand and Industrious. So I think that's great. Okay. These are like I love when Gio kind of goes off and digs into some of the softer conversations, but this has also been on my list of questions to ask for a while, aside from Avalon Bay. Back to business is the Nuveen relationship with, the sort of, high amenity version of hospitality, which also feels like maybe it's a little bit of an experiment. You've got the Avalon Bay, like, work very close to home. And then you've got if you're going to come into Manhattan and you want, all the things at your disposal. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Nuveen, so the context here is we have a partnership with Nuveen where we do a lot together, but one of the things we do is manage really beautiful high-end shared common areas of the building. And in addition to managing them for the long-term tenants of the building, allow people to essentially buy subscriptions to get to use those spaces. And I will start by saying, I know I said, we love all of our landlord partners, but I have like a particular affection for Nuveen. I think it's a really special company. It's one of 2 Fortune 500s led by a Black female. It's just like, it's just, I think as good as it gets in the sort of landlord world. And I think that business line we call it tenant experience management, where usually adjacent to a flex space, but not always, we manage the tenant experience of the building, is a really important and growing part of what we do. And I'm a true believer in it. Like, I think we can work with a landlord and get a much better front of house experience, a much better shared space experience than some traditional property managers, I think, are able to get out of a property. And Nuveen is probably the landlord where we've pushed the envelope the most, worked most closely with them. And I think it's paying off. Like, what I see is, I don't want to get too wonky, but like it used to be you go to the 20th floor of the building, you sit at desk 51, you work for 10 hours, you come down. That's obviously not true anymore. On Fridays, I work from home, as you can tell. Like you're working in a greater diversity of spaces, and that's true horizontally across the city. Sometimes I'm in Brooklyn, sometimes I'm in Midtown, sometimes I'm at home. But because that's true, that's also true vertically within a building. What I see in the last couple of years is so much more willingness to move up and down throughout a building. I'm going to go up to my Ernst & Young floor for a couple hours, then I'm going to work in the cafe at the building, then I'm going to work in the shared space. And that puts a lot of pressure on having like A+ shared spaces at the building level. And I think Nuveen's right to have their eye on that and to really be kind of trying to be best in class on that front. If any of you live in New York, the one I would point to that's other than Nuveen is Penn 1, a Vornado building that's literally on top of Penn Station. So I wouldn't say it's the sexiest neighborhood in New York, but that's the best example I've seen in the country. Again, other than some of these Nuveen ones, of a building where like you might work on the 30th floor, but you want to spend your whole day, in that sort of common area. It's 100,000 square feet of sort of like amenities and activities, and it's amazing.
I'm looking at Jamie because I'm letting her ask more questions.
No, I get the sense that Industrious, we've had such a shift in terms of following the consumer. And I get the sense that kind of that's your mindset around like, let's figure out where people want to be and how they want to do work, and not like, we're going to do 25,000 feet and it's going to be this floor plan and go, which complicates the model a little bit. I mean, back to this sort of branding, but you also, the product that you put into the market really varies, or the services that you provide based on, what's happening in a market. Obviously, Manhattan will look different. Does Avalon Bay, what markets is the Avalon Bay? Mostly California, but
those are basically in like high-end suburbs of cities. The first ones are in California.
Right.
I believe that you can walk into any Industrious in the world and it's pretty clear the commonality in terms of the service experience, the sort of the underlying philosophy of what makes for a great workplace experience. Like, we think people need to be comfortable. Once they're comfortable, you want them to be empowered. Once they're powered, you want them to be focused. And once they're focused, you want them to be inspired. And everything kind of builds from that comfortable, powered, focused, inspired. And it can reflect in different ways. But I think we've managed to do it. I think where I worry more is less that it's like there's good Industriouses and bad ones. It's a little hard when we like take over WeWorks and have to alter them. Like, that's probably the one that puts the most pressure at the actual product level. I think what I worry about now is there are so many different ways people want to work, and you try to meet that you'll be like, okay, let me set you up with a private office for 7 people, plus 8 access passes, plus our special office for everyone program where once a week it can be in a larger plus. And I think that complexity of the number of ways you can buy the product and the number of subscription types, we're probably at the limit. And I would love to figure out a way to meet all those different needs with a simpler set of subscriptions and ways to buy.
You and probably everyone else on this call that's encountering the right. Like, I think that the consumer is like, oh, the choice about working is mine. And so I want it my way, So let me tell you what package I would like.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay. I missed a question in here about acquisitions.
So I was actually about to touch on that. So
jump in, Gio.
Basically a two-pronged question on acquisitions and growth, right? Number one, you brought up WeWork. Obviously they just announced they're closing 40 plus locations. They gave us square footage. So that probably means they're going to downsize a bunch of them too, which they probably should. So the first part of the question is, you just mentioned how difficult it is to pick up, not just WeWorks, but Spaces and other operators, difficulties that they've closed. Is that something that excites you when you see that? Obviously not that they're doing poorly, but the opportunity to step in and take over those spaces, or it's something you're like, oh man, it's a struggle?
Somewhere in between the two. Like, I'm never excited just because we're so in the landlord world. Whenever you hear of a thing closing, there's a landlord on the other end of that probably put out a big TI package and is freaking out about, so and probably WeWork employees lost the job. So I would never be like excited that a thing was closing. I do think as a business opportunity, we now know how to do it. You walk in, you test everything, like the exact spacing of the electrical, the acoustical performance, the HVAC, etc. And then you just say, there are things you can ameliorate. If there's like a kind of gaudy common area that's oriented the wrong way, or with a reasonable amount of money, you can get that to something pretty special. If you can hear every word the person in the office next to you says, then you really can't do it. Like, it would be cheaper to start from scratch than to try to remediate that. And for whatever reason, there seems to be no rhyme or reason. Like, we go into certain competitor spaces and it's like, wow, acoustical performance is great, HVAC works great, electrical is great, we're in. And we go into spaces and we just have to say to the landlord, I am so sorry, I don't know what happened here. And it doesn't seem like it's based on, it might be like what project manager did it, or what, like it doesn't seem like it's even driven by vintage, but for whatever reason, now we know what tests to run in order to identify which ones you could take over. And so if there's 40, my guess is 10 of those are convertible, and maybe the rest are like, it could be converted to something, but probably not to an Industrious.
Okay. And then the other part of the question, which was asked, and just in general, as far as growth and acquisitions go, we know TechSpace and, the HANA brand, you basically were was brought in through the CBRE investment / partnership. Do you see yourself going out and continuing to acquire brands, especially in these secondary, tertiary markets, or just continue growing organically?
I think we'll keep doing M&A. Like, you know, we bought Breather. I think I'm pretty happy about that one. I think like, so probably would be a mix of other flex spaces and you know, just adjacent products. But in general, I think right now, because markets are really tight, going and paying a bunch of cash for a business, which would accelerate the next time you would need to go to the market and raise cash. That's probably the one thing that I would say, you know, we probably do have 20 appetite for M&A in 2023, but my guess is it'd be like 80% stock-based and 20% cash-based.
And do you ever see yourself acquiring real estate?
I don't think so. I think we're going to IPO at some point, and I think I used to work at a hedge fund, and it was like, you know, these businesses where you just can't tell what's up and what's down and what their balance sheet is. It's like I had to stay up till 5 a.m. figuring out. So maybe it's like I have the scar tissue of that, but I think businesses should be simple enough to follow. And if Industrious had management fee streams and this, and also building ownership, I could see us partnering with a landlord to say, we'll work together to have the Industrious TPG or the Industrious Blackstone, you know, whatever you want to call it, streetcar suburban campus conversion fund. And we're going to help you assess which ones to do it and run them. But I think even in that case, we would probably just get a management fee or something like that for it. You don't want to get greedy when you're growing a business. Like, I believe this is going to be a giant industry. I think everyone's right that it's going to be 30, 40% of how companies, you know, can basically manage their workplace needs. I think there's going to be probably 3, maximum 4 global platforms that have 90% of the revenue, and the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is to be one of those 3 or 4 and to be the best of them. It's not to start larding on like random additional things to sort of like supplement your P&L or something. Anything that didn't bolster our competitive position, our ability to say we're the best at what we do, I would be very scared of.
So time's up. So last question. So who is your hero?
Oh, who is my hero? I mean, this is so boring.
You can be dorky and cheesy. It's okay.
I mean, my dad, like, you know, moved here from Argentina and was like with like $200 or something. And I think, you know, became a doctor and I think was a successful professional, but he's 87. And during the pandemic, we had to like find a way to get him to my sister's like pool house in Michigan because he was on a cross Mexico road trip. He used to drive from London to Beijing every other year. Like he just has like a zest for life and has somehow found a way to be an amazing father, like a serious professional, and also not take things too seriously. That is like, I found maybe not heroic, but super inspiring and helpful as a model for like what that kind of life can be.
So last part of the question, piggybacking on that one, if he were to say the 3 things that he loves about you the most, what would they be?
Oh my God. He's very mushy. Oh, Jamuchi, I can't even keep it to 3. I don't know. I think he kind of, the stuff you guys, I think he thinks I have like a good ethical framework, and I think we have a lot of fun together, and he likes to laugh. And I think he's like not a grandfather type. I think he's like, I did that. I have 11, whatever. I have so many, like, he has like 35 grandkids or something. But he did say to me recently that he was like really proud of watching me be a father, which was, I think, a nice family moment.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. I know that throws people off sometimes. Jamie, you want to close us out?
This is great. Yeah, sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
No, Gio asked the best questions. I love the personal ones. Thank you, Jamie, for being willing to do this Friday,
Yeah.
before the holiday. You always have a lot going on, and for being willing to answer all of
course.
Gio's funny personal questions.
No, this was amazing. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
We appreciate it, and happy
Thanks a
Thanksgiving.
lot. Bye.
Bye, everyone.